The afternoon sun pressed down on Telluride like a furnace with the door left open. Heat shimmered off the cracked pavement of Mountain View apartments, turning the air thick and hard to breathe. The kind of heat that made dogs pant in the shade and made men wonder why they'd chosen to live in a place that felt like the surface of another planet 3 months out of the year. Garrett Brennan wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his forearm and squinted at the sagging fence he'd been hired to repair. $38 for 4 hours of work. 40 if he finished before 5. He'd take the 40. He always took whatever was offered because a man without a pension or a plan didn't have the luxury of pride. At 39 years old, Gary looked like what he was, a man who'd once been built for something bigger and was now making do with what remained. His shoulders were still broad, but his frame had gone lean in the 2 years since his discharge. His hair, dark brown and cut military short, out of habit rather than regulation, was starting to show threads of gray at the temples. A short beard, more salt than pepper, covered a jaw that hadn't relaxed in a long time. His eyes were the color of winter sky, pale gray blue, and they carried the particular weariness of someone who'd seen things he couldn't unsee and done things he couldn't undo. He wore a faded gray t-shirt with a hole near the hem, canvas work pants, stained with wood glue and paint, and boots that had another year in them if he was careful. The scar on his right thigh, a puckered souvenir from a piece of shrapnel that had ended his career, ached in the heat. It always ached. He'd stopped noticing. Beside him, lying in the only patch of shade the fence provided, was Kodiak. Cody was 6 years old, a German shepherd with a black and tan coat that had faded slightly in the Colorado sun. His eyes were amber sharp and watchful even in rest. A 3-inch scar ran along his right side, a twin to Gary's own wound. They'd earned them together. 3 tours in the Middle East. Cody had been a Navy K-9 trained to detect explosives, trained to fight, trained to save lives. When Gary's career ended, Cody's had ended too. The Navy had let them retire together. It was the only mercy either of them had received. Cody didn't bark at strangers, didn't chase squirrels, didn't do much of anything except stay close to Gary and watch. Always watching. Some dogs forgot their training when they left the service. Cody hadn't. He couldn't. Gary hammered the last nail into the fence post and stepped back, testing the board with his hand. Solid. Good enough. He wiped his palms on his pants and glanced at his watch. 4:37. He'd make the $40. He was reaching for his toolbox when Cody stood. Not the slow stretching rise of a dog getting up from a nap. This was instant. Alert. Ears forward, body tense, eyes locked on something Gary couldn't see. A low growl rumbled in the shepherd's chest, barely audible but unmistakable. Gary froze. Cody didn't growl at nothing. In 6 years, through combat zones and bad neighborhoods and late-night walks through sketchy parks, Cody had never once reacted to something that wasn't real. If Cody was growling, something was wrong. Gary's hand moved instinctively toward his hip, toward the sidearm that wasn't there anymore. Hadn't been there for 2 years. Muscle memory was a bastard. "What is it, boy?" he said quietly. Cody's ears swiveled toward the back of the apartment complex, toward a cluster of storage units and dumpsters half hidden behind a warped wooden fence. He took 2 steps in that direction, then stopped and looked back at Gary. Waiting. Gary picked up the toolbox with his left hand, leaving his right free. Just in case. He didn't know for what. Just in case. "Show me," he said. Cody moved immediately, not running but walking with purpose, shoulders low, head slightly down, the posture of a dog on a mission. Gary followed, boots crunching on gravel, the heat pressing against his back like a hand. They rounded the corner of the building. The smell hit him first. Urine, feces, rot. The kind of smell that came from neglect so complete it had become cruelty. And then he heard it. A sound so faint he almost missed it under the hum of cicadas and the distant drone of traffic. A whimper. Weak. Broken. Not human. Cody stopped at the edge of the old wooden fence, the kind that had been there so long, the boards had turned gray and started to splinter. He looked back at Gary again, and this time his growl was louder. Not a warning for Gary, a warning for someone else. Gary set the toolbox down and stepped forward. He peered through a gap in the fence. What he saw made his jaw tighten and his fists clench before his brain had fully processed the image. A dog. German shepherd. Female. Lying on her side in the dirt, tied to a rusted steel post with a length of chain too short to let her stand. Her belly was swollen, grotesquely distended, the unmistakable shape of pregnancy. Her coat, which should have been thick and healthy, was matted and filthy, the black and tan dulled to mud brown. Her ribs showed through her sides like the bars of a cage. Her muzzle was wrapped in wire, a makeshift muzzle, tied so tight it cut into the fur at the corners of her mouth. And standing over her, holding a broom handle like a club, was a woman. The woman was in her early 40s, blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun, dressed in dark jeans and a cream-colored blouse that looked far too clean for the scene she occupied. Her face was pale, angular, expressionless. She wasn't angry. She wasn't emotional at all. She raised the broom handle and brought it down across the dog's back with the detached efficiency of someone taking out the trash. The dog flinched, but didn't cry out. Couldn't. The wire around her muzzle made sure of that. Gary didn't think. Thinking was for later. For after. He shoved the gate open. It swung wide with a screech of rusted hinges. The woman turned startled, the broom handle still raised. "Stop," Gary said. His voice came out low and rough, the voice he'd used to give orders in places where orders meant the difference between living and dying. "Stop right now." The woman's eyes narrowed. She didn't lower the broom. "This is private property. You need to leave." "Put it down." "I said leave." She swung the broom handle toward the dog again. Gary moved without thinking. 3 strides and he was there, his hand closing around the handle mid-swing, yanking it out of her grip so hard she stumbled backward. "Touch her again, and we're going to have a problem," Gary said. The woman straightened, brushing dirt from her blouse, her expression shifting from surprise to cold anger. "That dog is mine. You're trespassing. I'll call the police." "Good. Call them." Cody had already moved past Gary, positioning himself between the woman and the pregnant shepherd. His growl was a continuous rumble, now teeth just barely visible. The woman took a step back. Gary knelt beside the dog. Up close it was worse. The chain around her neck was too tight, the metal cutting into fur and skin. The wire muzzle had been on so long it had rubbed the fur away, leaving raw patches. Her eyes, dark brown and clouded with pain, turned toward him. She didn't try to bite, didn't try to move, just looked at him with the kind of exhaustion that came from suffering too long to fight anymore. "Easy, girl," Gary whispered. "I've got you." He pulled a multi-tool from his belt and started cutting the wire. His hands were steady. They were always steady when it mattered. The wire snapped and fell away. The dog's mouth opened slightly, drawing in a shuddering breath. Gary moved to the chain, next working the blade under the links where they connected to the post. The metal was old, corroded. It took 3 tries, but it broke. The woman's voice was sharp behind him. "You're stealing my property. I'm calling the police right now." "Do it," Gary said without looking up. He slid his arms under the dog, one beneath her shoulders, one beneath her haunches, careful of the swollen belly. She was terrifyingly light. A German shepherd should weigh 60, 70 pounds. This one felt like 40 at most. He stood cradling her against his chest. She didn't struggle, just rested her head against his shoulder, eyes half closed, breathing shallow and fast. Cody stayed between Gary and the woman as they moved toward the gate. Gary didn't look back, didn't say anything else. The woman was already on her phone, her voice high and urgent, words spilling out too fast for Gary to catch. He didn't care. His truck was parked at the curb, a battered Ford F-150 with primer spots on the hood and a cracked windshield. He'd left the windows down because the air conditioning didn't work. He laid the dog carefully in the passenger seat, then opened the extended cab and let Cody jump in. Cody immediately positioned himself so his head was next to the pregnant shepherd's, his body filling the gap between the seats. Protective, watchful. Gary climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. It coughed once, then quote. He pulled away from the curb, glancing in the rearview mirror. The woman was standing at the gate, phone pressed to her ear, staring after him, writing down his license plate number probably. Let her. Gary drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other resting lightly on the dog's side, feeling the rise and fall of her breathing. She was still alive. That was enough for now. Cody made a sound soft and low, almost a whine. Not distress, comfort. The pregnant shepherd's ear twitched, just barely, but it was something. Hold on, Gary said quietly to the dog, to Cody, to himself. Just hold on. The veterinary clinic was 10 minutes away, a single-story building off Highway 145 with faded blue paint and a sign that read Mountain Valley Veterinary Care. Gary had never been there before. He'd looked it up online once months ago when Cody had a limp that turned out to be nothing. He'd never called, couldn't afford to. He could afford this even less. But that wasn't the point anymore. He parked in the shade of a cottonwood tree and carefully lifted the dog from the truck. Cody jumped down and walked beside him to the entrance. The glass door was propped open, and the interior was mercifully cool, smelling of antiseptic and old carpet. A woman in her early 50s looked up from the front desk. She had brown-gray hair pulled back in a loose bun, Kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the weathered face of someone who'd spent a lot of years in the sun. Her name tag read Dr. Rebecca Walsh. She took one look at Gary at the dog in his arms and stood immediately. "Exam room 2, she said, already moving. No questions, no hesitation. Gary followed her down a narrow hallway into a small room with a metal exam table and a single window that looked out onto the parking lot. He laid the dog on the table as gently as he could. Dr. Walsh was already washing her hands, pulling on gloves, her movements quick and efficient. "What happened?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. "Found her tied up behind an apartment complex," Gary said. "Woman was beating her with a broom handle." Dr. Walsh's jaw tightened, but her hands stayed steady as she began examining the dog. She ran her fingers along the ribs, checked the gums, lifted the eyelids. "She's severely dehydrated, malnourished. This pregnancy is late term, maybe 38 days. She paused, frowning. "German Shepherds carry for 58 to 63 days. She's early, but not by much." She shaved a small patch of fur from the dog's neck and ran a handheld scanner over it. A faint beep, then nothing. Dr. Walsh frowned deeper. "Microchip's been damaged, scratched almost clean. I can only read the last 3 digits. 247. Gary's fists clenched. "Someone did that on purpose." "Yes." Dr. Walsh moved her hands over the dog's body, pausing at several spots along the neck and shoulders. "Injection sites, multiple, fresh and old." She looked up at Gary, her expression grim. "This isn't random abuse. Someone's been controlling her cycle. Oxytocin to induce early labor. Sedatives to keep her manageable. She's been kept pregnant for a long time. Years, probably." Gary felt something cold settle in his chest. The same feeling he used to get in the field when a situation was about to go sideways. When the intel didn't match reality and someone was about to get hurt. "Who does this?" he asked. "People who see animals as inventory," Dr. Walsh said quietly. She wrapped the dog in a thin blanket and started an IV line. The dog barely reacted. "I've seen 2 cases like this in the last year. Both dogs died. Complications from forced breeding. I was told to keep quiet or I'd lose my license." Gary looked at her. "But you're not going to. This time." Walsh's jaw set firm. Her hands paused on the IV line for just a moment. "No, not this time. I was a coward before. That got 2 dogs killed. I won't make that mistake again." She met his eyes. "Whatever happens, I'm documenting everything. They can take my license. I'll sleep better." The door opened behind them. Gary turned. The blonde woman from the apartment complex stood in the doorway. She'd changed her expression now. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her mouth trembling. She looked like she'd been crying. She probably had been. "For the cameras. For anyone watching." "That's my dog," she said, her voice shaking. "He stole her." 2 men stood behind her. One was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, wearing a dirty baseball cap and a canvas jacket despite the heat. The other wore a police uniform, county sheriff's deputy, judging by the patch on his shoulder. The deputy stepped forward. His name tag read Morrison. No relation. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step outside." Gary didn't move. "The dog was being beaten. She's evidence." "Ma'am." The deputy looked at the blonde woman. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "My daughter left the gate open. The dog got aggressive. Bit her. I was trying to protect my family." "She was chained to a post," Gary said flatly. "She couldn't have bitten anyone." "Sir, you need to come with me." Cody moved then, stepping between Gary and the deputy. Not aggressive, just present. A wall with breath. The man in the baseball cap shifted his weight. His hand moved towards his jacket. Gary saw it, cataloged it. Threat assessment was second nature. Dr. Walsh spoke up, her voice steady and clear. "Deputy Morrison, this animal has clear signs of systematic abuse. Injection marks, a damaged microchip, evidence of forced breeding. I'm documenting everything. You're welcome to wait while I complete my examination, but this dog is under my medical care and is not leaving this facility until she's stable." The blonde woman's eyes flicked toward Dr. Walsh, then back to the deputy. Something passed between them. Gary saw it. So did Cody. The shepherd's growl deepened. Gary reached into his pocket, slowly keeping his hands visible. The blonde woman had dropped her phone during the struggle at the fence. Gary had picked it up. Secure the evidence. Training never left. The phone's screen was still unlocked. Gary tapped it on and saw the message. Asset number 47 damaged. Terminate before whelping. Buyer canceled. Video below it 20 more messages. Threats, demands, numbers, locations. A GPS log showing 47 different addresses stretching from the Canadian border down through Colorado into New Mexico. Gary's thumb moved before he thought about it. He opened the camera app, switched to video, hit record, turned the lens toward the room. "What are you doing?" the blonde woman said sharply. Gary didn't answer. He held the phone up, making sure the camera captured the dog on the table, the IV line, the visible injuries. Dr. Walsh in the background, her gloved hands stained with blood. The deputy, the man in the baseball cap, the blonde woman's face no longer crying, now tight with anger. And then he did something he'd never thought he'd do. He tapped the Facebook icon, found the live button, pressed it. The stream started. 3 viewers, then 7, then 20. "My name is Garrett Brennan," Gary said, his voice steady and clear. "I'm a former Navy SEAL. The woman in this video beat this pregnant dog with a broom handle. The dog was chained, starving. Someone has been forcing her to breed. If something happens to me tonight, you'll know who did it." He turned the camera toward the blonde woman. Her face went white. "Turn that off," she hissed. 40 viewers, 70, 100. The deputy's radio crackled. A voice on the other end, tinny and urgent. The deputy stepped out of the room, speaking in low tones. The man in the baseball cap looked at the blonde woman. She shook her head sharply. He backed toward the door. Dr. Walsh moved between them and the dog. Her hands were still gloved, still bloody, but her posture was solid, immovable. "You need to leave," she said quietly. "Now." The blonde woman's expression shifted. The tears were gone. Her eyes were cold again. Calculating. "This isn't over," she said. She turned and walked out. The man in the baseball cap followed. Gary ended the live stream. 230 viewers, 47 comments. Someone had already shared it. He set the phone on the counter and looked at Dr. Walsh. "I just made this a lot worse, didn't I?" he said. Dr. Walsh pulled off her gloves and dropped them in the biohazard bin. "You just made it public. That's not worse, that's different." She turned back to the dog, checking the IV flow, the breathing rate. The shepherd's eyes were open now, watching Gary. Just watching. "She needs rest," Dr. Walsh said. "Minimal stress, and she needs to be somewhere safe. If that woman comes back with the right paperwork, I won't be able to stop her from taking the dog." Gary thought about his cabin. 1 room, leaky roof, no heat except the fireplace. 40 miles from town on a dirt road. "I have a place," he said. Dr. Walsh studied him for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Keep her warm, keep her hydrated. If she goes into labor, bring her straight back. Day or night, I'll leave my cell number." Gary lifted the dog carefully. She was a little heavier now with the IV fluids, but still far too light. Cody pressed close to his leg as they walked to the truck. The sun was lower now, the heat finally starting to break. Gary laid the dog in the passenger seat again, adjusting the blanket around her. Cody climbed into the back, positioning himself where he could see both Gary and the shepherd. Gary started the engine, checked the mirrors, and saw it. A gray sedan parked 3 spaces down. Engine running, windows tinted, no plates visible. Gary pulled out of the parking lot slowly. Not running. Running would confirm guilt. He drove the speed limit, kept his eyes on the road. The sedan followed. Not close, not obvious. 3 cars back, but following. Gary's hands tightened on the wheel. The cold feeling in his chest spread. This wasn't going to end quietly. Cody sensed it. His ears went back, his body tense. The pregnant shepherd's breathing quickened. "It's okay," Gary said softly. To the dog, to Cody, to himself. He turned onto Highway 145, heading west toward the mountains. Toward home. The sedan stayed 3 cars back. Gary didn't speed up. Didn't try to lose them. Not yet. First rule of evasion, don't let them know you know they're there. The highway stretched ahead, empty and straight, flanked by scrub brush and rock. The sun was sinking behind the peaks, turning the sky orange and red. Beautiful. Brutal. Gary glanced at the dog. Her eyes were half closed, head resting on the seat. Trusting him. She shouldn't. He'd already failed too many people to be trusted. But she didn't know that. Cody made a soft sound. Gary looked in the rear view mirror. The sedan was still there. "I know, boy," Gary said. "I know." He drove on into the fading light, and the sedan followed like a shadow that wouldn't let go. The cabin appeared in the headlights like something out of a different century. Rough-hewn logs darkened by weather and time. A sagging porch with 2 steps that creaked under weight. 1 window patched with plastic sheeting where a branch had punched through during last winter's storm. Gary had rented it for $300 a month because it was 40 miles from anywhere, and the landlord didn't ask questions. It wasn't much, but it was his. He killed the headlights and sat in the darkness for 30 seconds listening. The engine ticked as it cooled. Crickets sang in the brush. Somewhere distant, a coyote called. Normal sounds. The sedan hadn't followed him up the mountain road. Either they'd lost interest or they were smart enough to hang back and wait. Gary guessed the second option. He carried the pregnant shepherd inside while Cody swept the perimeter, nose to the ground, ears rotating like radar dishes. The cabin's interior was sparse. A wood-burning stove in the corner, a couch with springs that poked through the cushions, a table Gary had built himself from reclaimed lumber, a kitchenette with a propane camp stove because the electric range didn't work, one bedroom barely big enough for a mattress on the floor. Gary laid the dog on a folded blanket near the stove. The night would get cold. It always did in the mountains, even in summer. He lit kindling in the stove, coaxing a small fire to life. The orange glow pushed back the shadows. Cody came in through the door Gary had left open, did one more circuit of the room, then lay down beside the pregnant shepherd. Not touching, just close. His chin rested on his paws, but his eyes stayed open. On guard. Gary filled a bowl with water and set it within reach. The shepherd lifted her head slightly, sniffed but didn't drink. Too exhausted. Or too traumatized. Sometimes they were the same thing. He sat on the floor with his back against the couch and watched the two dogs. The fire crackled. The cabin creaked in the wind. For a moment, it almost felt peaceful. Then headlights swept across the window. Gary was on his feet instantly, hand moving toward his hip, toward the weapon that still wasn't there. Training overrode instinct, but instinct died hard. Cody rose silent, positioning himself between the door and the shepherd. His lips pulled back just enough to show teeth. Not a bark, not a growl, just readiness. At 11:43, headlights swept through the trees, distant, maybe a mile down the mountain road. Then they went dark. Someone parking, approaching on foot. Gary moved to the side of the door frame, out of the line of fire if this went bad. Footsteps on gravel, slow, deliberate, not trying to be quiet, but not rushing either. A knock at the door. 3 measured raps. Door's open, Gary said. It swung inward. A man stood silhouetted against the night. Broad shoulders, baseball cap. The same man from the clinic. He held his hands up, palms out, showing they were empty. Easy, the man said. His voice was rough, like he'd spent years breathing dust. Not here to start trouble. Then why are you here? To warn you. Gary didn't move. I'm listening. The man glanced past him at Cody, at the pregnant shepherd lying by the stove. Something crossed his face. Not quite regret, not quite guilt. Something in between. Name's Victor Howell, he said. People call me Vic. I work for Vanessa Pritchard, the woman from the apartments. The woman who was beating a pregnant dog. Vic's jaw tightened. Yeah, her. Get to the point. Vic lowered his hands slowly. You don't know what you walked into. That dog, she's not just some pet Vanessa was abusing. She's inventory. Asset number 47. She's worth money, a lot of it. Gary felt the cold thing in his chest settle deeper. Keep talking. Vic stepped inside, moving carefully, keeping his hands visible. Cody's growl was a low vibration in the air. Vic stopped moving. Vanessa runs a breeding operation, Vic said. On paper, it's legal. Rocky Mountain Kennels, licensed, inspected. All the paperwork in order. But the real business that happens off the books, she brings dogs in from Canada, stolen, strays, doesn't matter. Pure breeds, German shepherds mostly, high demand. And then what? Then she breeds them, over and over, keeps them pregnant as much as possible, hormones to control the cycles, sedatives to keep them manageable. When the puppies are born, they go to buyers. Black market. $18,000 per pup if the bloodline's right. Gary looked at the shepherd by the stove. 9 puppies. That was what Dr. Walsh had estimated. 9 puppies at $18,000 each. $162,000, Gary said flatly. Give or take. Vic shifted his weight. That dog was supposed to deliver next week. Buyer lined up. Everything arranged. Then, something went wrong. Dog got aggressive. Bit Vanessa. Vanessa freaked out and started hitting her. Buyer saw the damage on a video call and canceled. Now Vanessa's out the money and the dog's a liability. So she was going to kill her. Yeah, Vic looked down at his boots. Yeah, she was. And you're okay with that? Vic's head snapped up. I'm not okay with any of this, but I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. Not when they're holding your sister hostage. The words hung in the air. Gary studied Vic's face in the firelight, saw the exhaustion there, the fear poorly hidden behind anger. Explain, Gary said. Vic sat down heavily on the porch step just inside the doorway. He pulled off his cap and ran a hand through thinning brown hair. Vanessa doesn't run this operation alone. She can't. She owes money to a man named Vincent Dalton. $320,000. Dalton's the real power. He's got connections. Cops, judges. He moves dogs across state lines. Canada to Colorado to Mexico. 47 dogs in the last 3 years through Vanessa's place alone. 31 of them died. Complications. Infections. Vanessa just buried them out back and kept going. Gary's fists clenched. Cody sensed it and moved closer to his leg. My sister Katie, she's 21, Vic continued. She was working as a waitress in Denver. Wrong place, wrong time. She saw something she shouldn't have. Dalton's guys grabbed her 6 months ago. They're holding her at a warehouse in Denver. They told me if I don't do what Vanessa says, if I don't help keep this operation running, they'll kill Katie, or worse, sell her, same as they do with the tongues. He looked up at Gary. His eyes were bloodshot, haunted. So yeah, I helped Vanessa. I helped transport dogs. I helped clean up the messes. Because the alternative is my baby sister gets hurt. You want to judge me for that, go ahead. I'm already judging myself. Gary was quiet for a long moment. He'd seen this before. In other places, other wars. People trapped between bad choices and worse ones, making decisions that kept them awake at night and walking during the day. Why are you telling me this? Gary asked. Because Dalton knows about you now. Vanessa called him right after you left the clinic. That live stream you did that went viral, 2,000 people watched it, shared it. Dalton can't have that kind of attention. He's going to come for you, for the dean. And he's not going to ask nicely. Let him come, Vic shook his head. You don't understand. Dalton has 14 cops on his payroll, county sheriffs, state police. When he comes, it won't be thugs in masks. It'll be badges and warrants. Legal, clean, and you'll have no way to prove otherwise. The live stream is proof. The live stream is your word against a licensed breeder with a clean record. Dalton's lawyers will bury you. They've done it before. Gary looked at the shepherd again. She'd fallen asleep, her breathing slow and steady. In the firelight, she looked almost peaceful. Almost. What do you want me to do? Gary asked. Give the dog back. Walk away. Forget you saw anything. If you do that, Dalton will let it go. You're nobody to him. Just some guy who interfered. He'll write it off. And the dog, Vic didn't answer. Didn't need to. Gary shook his head. No. Then you're going to die, and so is everyone in this cabin. I've been ready to die for a long time, Gary said quietly. Turns out it's harder than it looks. Vic stared at him. Then he stood putting his cap back on. I tried. Can't say I didn't try. He reached into his jacket pocket. Cody tensed, but what Vic pulled out was a slip of paper. He set it on the table. That's my number. When you change your mind, when you realize you can't win this, call me. I'll try to help you get out, for what it's worth. He walked to the door, paused, looked back. That dog in there, the pregnant one, she's got a name. Vanessa called her Willow. I don't know why, but she used to be different before all this. She used to trust people. Vic stepped out into the darkness. His footsteps receded. An engine started. Headlights swept across the trees and disappeared down the mountain road. Gary locked the door. Not that it would stop anyone determined, but it was something. He sat back down on the floor. Cody lay beside him, close enough that Gary could feel the dog's warmth. Willow, the pregnant shepherd, slept on. Unaware or uncaring that her fate was being decided by men who saw her as a problem to solve. Gary closed his eyes, tried to quiet his mind, but the memories came anyway. They always did. Kandahar province. 4 years ago, a village outside the green zone. Gary's team had been tasked with extracting a local informant and his family. Man, wife, 3 kids. Simple op. In and out, except the Taliban had gotten there first. The informant was already dead when they arrived. The family was still alive. Barely. The wife was begging in Pashto. Gary didn't speak the language, but he understood. Please help us. Don't leave us. Command had radioed in. Situation compromised. Enemy inbound. Extract immediately. No civilians, Gary had argued. There were 5 of them. They could carry the kids. The wife could run. Negative. Orders are orders. Move out. They'd left. Gary and his team left that family in a compound with Taliban fighters 20 minutes out. The woman's face, the children crying. The youngest couldn't have been more than 4. 3 days later, they'd gotten the intel report. Family executed. Burned. Message to anyone else who thought about cooperating with Americans. Gary had put in for discharge 2 months later. Medical reasons. The shrapnel in his leg was real enough. But that wasn't why he left. He opened his eyes, looked at Willow. "Not this time," he said quietly. "Not this time." Cody's ear twitched. The shepherd understood tone, if not words. Gary stood and checked the windows, checked the back door. The fire was burning low. He added another log. Then he pulled a worn green duffel bag from the closet in the bedroom. He hadn't opened it in 2 years. Hadn't wanted to. Inside was his old gear, not the uniform. He'd left that with the Navy, but the things a man kept when he couldn't quite let go. A tactical flashlight, a fixed blade knife, paracord, a first aid kit that had seen better days. And at the bottom, wrapped in an oiled cloth, something he'd told himself he'd never touch again. A Sig Sauer PT 9mm, 15-round magazine. The sidearm he'd carried for 6 years. He'd kept it when he mustered out. Legal, registered, locked away. He checked the chamber. Empty. The magazine was in a separate pouch. Also empty. He'd kept the ammunition in a different bag. Safer that way. Less temptation. He loaded the magazine slowly. 15 rounds, slid it into the grip, racked the slide, checked the safety. Training never left. His hands knew what to do even when his mind didn't want them to. He set the pistol on the table, looked at it, a tool. Just a tool. That's what they'd taught him. Not good or evil, just metal and physics. The morality came from the hand that held it. Cody whined softly, not fear, concern. The dog knew what guns meant. "I know," Gary said. "I know." He sat back down. The fire crackled. Willow slept. The night deepened. At 11:58, movement in the trees caught Gary's eye through the window. A shadow among shadows. Then another. 3 figures, maybe 4, circling the cabin. Gary's pulse stayed steady. Training overrode instinct. You could learn to manage fear. You could use it, turn it into focus. He moved to the back door, listened, heard the scrape of metal on metal. Someone was working the lock. Not picking it, forcing it. The door gave with a muted crack. Gary stepped back, pistol raised, finger alongside the trigger guard. Not on the trigger. Not yet. The door swung open. A man stepped through, silhouette only, flashlight in one hand, something else in the other. Gary couldn't tell what. "Stop right there," Gary said. His voice was calm, flat, the voice that came from a place beyond fear. The man froze. The flashlight beam swung toward Gary's face. Gary didn't flinch, didn't look away. You never looked away from the light. You looked through it, found the source. "Easy," the man said. It was Vic, voice strained, hands shaking. "Easy, man, it's me." "I know who it is. Why are you in my house?" Vic lowered the flashlight. "They're coming, right now. I tried to buy you time, but Dalton sent a crew. They'll be here in 5 minutes, maybe less." "So you broke in to tell me that?" "I broke in because the front was being watched. I didn't want them to see me." Vic's breathing was heavy, panicked. "You need to run. Take the dog and run. I can show you a back way down the mountain." "They don't know about it." Gary lowered the pistol slightly. "Why are you helping me?" Vic laughed. It was a broken sound. "Because I'm tired. I'm tired of being part of this. I'm tired of watching dogs die. I'm tired of doing what Dalton says because I'm too scared to do what's right. Maybe this is me trying to fix one thing. Just one thing before it all falls apart." Gary studied him, looked for the lie, couldn't find it. "Your sister," Gary said. "Katie, where's she being held?" "Warehouse on Blake Street in Denver, 1547. Dalton keeps merchandise there before it goes south." "Merchandise?" "Dogs, women, whatever he's moving that week." Gary felt something snap inside him. Not anger. Anger was hot and stupid. This was cold, purposeful. The same feeling he'd had when he'd taken the oath all those years ago, to protect, to defend, to stand between the innocent and the dark. "You're going to help me," Gary said. Vic blinked. "What?" "You're going to help me get Katie out, and we're going to stop Dalton. You're insane. You're one guy with a bum and a pregnant shepherd. Dalton has an army. Dalton has people who work for him because they're paid or scared. That's not an army. That's a liability." Headlights swept through the trees. Close, too close. Vic's face went white. "They're here." Gary grabbed Willow's blanket, wrapping it around her. The shepherd woke, confused, frightened. He lifted her carefully. She was heavier than before. The IV fluids. The rest. Small improvements. Cody, Gary said, with me. The shepherd moved immediately to Gary's side. Vic was bucking toward the door. There's a trail, north side. Follow it down half a mile. Leads to a service road. My truck's there, keys under the mat. You're coming with us. I can't. They'll know. They'll kill Katie. They're going to kill Katie anyway, Gary said. You know that. Men like Dalton don't leave witnesses. Vic's hands were shaking. His face twisted. Gary recognized the look. A man at the edge of a decision that would define the rest of his life. Voices outside, orders being given in low tones, professional, organized. Last chance, Gary said. Vic took a breath, nodded once. Okay, okay. They went out the back door into the darkness. Cody led the way, nose down, tracking the trail Gary couldn't see. Gary followed, carrying Willow, the pistol in his waistband. Vic brought up the rear. Behind them, the cabin door splintered inward. Flashlight beams cut through the interior. Shouts of clear and empty. They were 50 yards into the trees when Gary heard it. A voice over a radio, loud enough to carry. They're running. North trail. Pursue. Footsteps crashed through the underbrush, fast, getting closer. Gary didn't run. Running made noise, made mistakes. He moved quickly but carefully, letting Cody guide him, trusting the dog's senses over his own. They reached the service road. An old pickup truck sat in the weeds. Vic fumbled under the mat, found the keys. They climbed in. Gary in the passenger seat with Willow on his lap. Cody in the bed. Vic behind the wheel. The engine turned over on the second try. Vic threw it in gear and drove without headlights, using moonlight and memory to navigate the rutted road. A quarter-mile down, headlights flared behind them. Close, 2 vehicles, maybe 3. Vic cursed and floored it. The truck fishtailed on the gravel. They'll run us down, Vic said. This truck can't outrun them. Gary looked at the map in his mind. The terrain, the roads. Take the next left, toward the gorge. That road's a dead end, washed-out bridge. I know. Vic glanced at him. Then he cranked the wheel. The truck skidded onto a narrow path barely wider than the vehicle itself. Trees pressed in on both sides. Branches scraped metal. The headlights behind them followed. A mile down the road ended. Just stopped. Ahead was nothing but darkness and the sound of rushing water far below. The bridge was gone. Washed out 10 years ago and never rebuilt. Vic slammed the brakes. Now what? Gary opened the door. We push it over. Vic stared. What? The truck, over the edge. Make them think we went with it. They worked fast. Gary set Willow gently on the ground, wrapped in her blanket. Cody stood guard over her. Gary jumped into the driver's seat, steering. Vic pushed from behind, grunting with effort. The truck rolled toward the precipice. 10 feet. 5. Gary's boots scraped gravel as he pushed harder. The front wheels went over. The truck teetered, suspended for one impossible moment. Then it dropped. The crash echoed up from below, metal screaming against rock. The sound of destruction was final. Complete. Now we walk, Gary said. Vic stood frozen, staring down into the darkness. They'll think. That's the idea. The pursuing headlights appeared behind them. Engines roared. Brakes squealed. Doors slammed. But Gary and his group were already gone. Into the trees. Into the darkness. Cody leading with his nose. Gary carrying Willow. Vic stumbling behind, still processing what they'd done. They walked for 2 hours. No trail. Just instinct and Cody's nose. Willow grew heavier with every step, but Gary didn't stop. Couldn't. Stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant doubt. Finally, they reached pavement, a highway, empty at 3 in the morning. Gary set Willow down gently. She looked up at him with those dark eyes. Trusting. Still trusting despite everything. Vic collapsed against a mile marker. What now? Gary pulled out the phone. Vanessa's phone. The one he'd kept. He scrolled through the messages again. The GPS logs. The addresses. Now, Gary said, we take the fight to them. Vic stared at him. You really are insane. Probably, Gary said, but I'm not wrong. He looked down at Willow, at Cody standing guard beside her. At Vic, exhausted and terrified, but still here. We're going to need help, Gary said. Real help. He opened the contacts, scrolled to the most recent call, a number with a Denver area code. He dialed. It rang 4 times. Then a woman's voice alert despite the hour. Professional. This is Agent Fletcher. Gary took a breath. My name is Garrett Brennan. I'm a former Navy SEAL. I have evidence of an animal trafficking operation involving police corruption, and I need the FBI right now. There was a pause, then, stay on the line. Tell me everything. And Gary did. Across town in a different house with better locks and cleaner walls, Vanessa Pritchard sat in her kitchen, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee gone cold hours ago. Her phone buzzed. Dalton. She didn't answer. It buzzed again. She picked up. Your incompetence is costing me. Dalton's voice was ice. The seal escaped. The dog's gone. The FBI is asking questions. I did what you said. It's not my fault. I don't care about fault. I care about solutions. The debt is now 400,000. You have 72 hours. I don't have that kind of money. You know I don't. Then I suggest you find it, or I'll recoup my losses another way. Vanessa's throat tightened. You promised. You said if I cooperated, you'd let Emma go. Emma is comfortable, for now. Whether she stays that way depends on you. The line went dead. Vanessa looked at the photo on her refrigerator. Her daughter, 19 years old, blonde like her mother, studying nursing at Denver Community College. Or she had been, before Dalton's men picked her up 3 weeks ago. Insurance, he'd called it. Vanessa had tried to get out, tried to walk away from the breeding operation. That's when Dalton showed her the video. Emma tied to a chair, gagged, terrified. You work for me until the debt is paid, Dalton had said, or Emma works for me in other ways. Now the seal had destroyed everything. The FBI was coming. Dalton would never let Emma go. Not now, unless... Vanessa picked up her phone, dialed a number she'd found in the local paper. FBI tip line. Her hands shook as she waited for someone to answer. Maybe saving one life could save her own. FBI, how can I help you? Vanessa took a breath. My name is Vanessa Pritchard. I have information about Vincent Dalton, and I need witness protection. For me and my daughter. The sun rose over Denver like a copper coin dropped in dirty water. Orange light spilled across the warehouse district, catching on broken windows and rust-stained metal siding. This was the part of the city tourists didn't see, where legitimate businesses ended and the gray market began, where a man could rent a building for cash and nobody asked what went inside. Gary stood in the parking lot of a 24-hour diner called The Griddle, watching the morning traffic build on Interstate 25. Behind him through the smudged windows, Vic sat in a booth nursing his third cup of coffee. Willow lay on a blanket in the back of a borrowed SUV, sleeping fitfully. Cody sat beside the vehicle, ears forward alert, despite being awake for 36 hours straight. FBI Special Agent Diane Fletcher arrived at 6:47 in an unmarked sedan. She was a woman in her late 40s with iron gray hair, pulled back in a tight bun, and the kind of face that had forgotten how to smile somewhere around her 10th year with the Bureau. She wore a dark pantsuit and practical shoes. No jewelry except a watch, no makeup. Everything about her said efficiency over appearance. She approached Gary directly, ignoring the diner, ignoring Vic in the window. Her gaze was sharp as surgical tools, missing nothing. Mr. Brennan, she said, no handshake, no pleasantries. You've caused quite a situation. Wasn't my intention, Gary said. Intentions rarely matter, results do. She glanced at the SUV at Willow, visible through the tinted glass. The dog. Alive, stable, pregnant. Dr. Walsh sent me the medical records. The injection sites, the damaged microchip, the evidence of forced breeding. Fletcher's expression didn't change, but something cold entered her voice. I've been working animal trafficking cases for 8 years. This is systematic, professional, which means it's not isolated. It's not. There are 47 documented cases, 31 dead dogs. This operation runs from Canada to Mexico. And you know this, how Gary pulled out Vanessa's phone. He'd kept it charged, kept it secure. The woman who was abusing the dog dropped this. I haven't tampered with it. GPS logs, messages, financial records, it's all there. Fletcher took the phone with gloved hands, slipping it into an evidence bag. This was obtained without a warrant. It was evidence at a crime scene. You're not law enforcement. I'm a citizen making a report. Fletcher's lips might have twitched. Might have been a smile. Hard to tell. You were a SEAL. DevGru. Regular teams. 3 tours. Explains the tactical thinking. She pocketed the evidence bag. The man in the diner, Victor Howell. What's his involvement? He works for Vanessa Pritchard, but his sister's being held hostage by Vincent Dalton. He's cooperating. Coercion as a defense, classic. Fletcher turned and walked toward the diner without invitation. Gary followed. Cody stayed with Willow. Inside, Fletcher slid into the booth across from Vic. Gary sat beside him. A waitress approached, but Fletcher waved her off with a gesture that could have stopped traffic. Mr. Howell, Fletcher said, I'm going to make this very simple. You have information I need. You're going to give it to me. In exchange, I'll consider your cooperation when charges are filed. and they will be filed. Vic's hands trembled around his coffee cup. My sister Katie, she's being held at 1547 Blake Street, Dalton's warehouse. She's been there 6 months. And you did nothing. He said he'd kill her. He's going to kill her anyway. Men like Dalton don't leave witnesses. Fletcher pulled out a small recording device and set it on the table. Tell me everything, names, dates, locations, how the operation works, who's involved, all of it. Vic talked for 40 minutes. His voice was flat, exhausted, the voice of a man who'd been carrying a weight too long and had finally set it down. He detailed the pipeline. Dogs stolen or purchased in Canada, transported across the border in legitimate pet transport vehicles with forged papers, brought to Vanessa's facility outside Telluride, bred repeatedly using hormone injections to control cycles. Puppies sold on the black market to buyers who didn't ask questions. 18,000 per pup. Pure breeds. Perfect bloodlines. When dogs became too damaged to breed, they were terminated. Buried on Vanessa's property, 47 dogs had passed through in 3 years. 31 were dead. 11 were still at the facility. 5 were unaccounted for. Dalton has 14 law enforcement officers on his payroll, Vic said. County sheriffs mostly. A few state troopers. They provide protection and interfere with investigations, make evidence disappear. He pays them $20,000 a year each. Cash. No records. Fletcher's expression remained neutral, but Gary saw her jaw tighten. Corruption was personal for cops like her. A betrayal of everything the badge meant. Names, Fletcher said. Vic rattled them off. Fletcher's recording device captured each one. When Vic finished, Fletcher turned the device off. Your sister. Describe the warehouse, layout, security, how many people are typically inside. I've only been there twice. Delivering dogs. It's a converted industrial space. 2 stories. Main floor is open. Storage containers along the walls. That's where they keep the merchandise before transport. Second floor is offices. Dalton works from there. Security is light during the day. 2 guys usually. At night it's heavier. 4 or 5. They're armed. And Katie? Second floor, small room in the back, locked from the outside. They bring her food twice a day, that's all I know. Fletcher stood. Both of you stay here. Don't leave. Don't call anyone. An agent will be here in 20 minutes to take your statements formally. What are you going to do? Gary asked. My job. Fletcher walked out. Gary watched her sedan pull away, merging into morning traffic. He looked at Vic. The man had aged 10 years in one night, gray stubble on his jaw, eyes hollow and red-rimmed. You think she believed me? Vic asked. She believed the evidence. You're just the messenger. Katie's still in there. If Dalton hears the FBI's coming, he'll move her. Or worse. Gary was quiet for a moment. Then he stood. Stay here. Watch Willow and Cody. Where are you going? To do something stupid. 1547 Blake Street was a 3-story brick building with boarded windows and a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. A fading sign on the side read Denver Industrial Supply. The parking lot held 4 vehicles. 2 panel vans, a black SUV, a gray sedan that looked familiar. Gary parked the borrowed SUV 2 blocks away and walked the perimeter. He'd left his pistol with Vic. Going armed into a federal situation was a good way to get shot by the good guys. But he'd kept the knife. Training never left. The building had 3 entrances. Front door secured with a deadbolt and security camera. Loading dock and back chained shut. Side door rusted and half hidden by dumpsters. The side door was the weakness. Always was. Gary approached from the blind spot of the security cameras. The lock was old. He used his knife blade to slip the latch. Took 40 seconds. The door opened with a squeal of hinges that made him wince. Inside was darkness and the smell of motor oil and decay. Gary let his eyes adjust. He was in a corridor, concrete floor, exposed pipes overhead. Light spilled from under a door at the far end. He moved silently. The years in the teams had taught him how to walk in a way that made no sound. Weight on the balls of the feet, knees slightly bent, breathing controlled. He reached the door, listened. Voices on the other side. 2 men talking about a basketball game. Casual. Bored. Gary tested the door handle, unlocked. He eased it open an inch, peered through. The main floor was exactly as Vic had described. Open warehouse space. Storage containers lined against the walls. Some were closed. Some were open, revealing stacks of kennels. Empty kennels mostly. A few with dogs inside. German shepherds. Silent. Watching. The two men sat at a card table near the center of the space. One was reading a newspaper. The other was on his phone. Neither was paying attention. Gary slipped inside, kept to the shadows along the wall, moved between containers. The dogs watched him but didn't bark. They'd learned silence the hard way. He counted 11 dogs, all German shepherds, all female, various stages of pregnancy or recovery from birth. They were thin, too thin, eyes dull with resignation. Gary's jaw tightened, but he kept moving. He needed to find Katie. Second floor, back room. Stairs were at the far end, metal, open frame. They'd make noise. Gary waited until one of the men laughed at something on his phone. Used the sound to cover his footsteps on the first 3 steps. Waited. Moved again when a truck passed outside. The second floor was offices. Doors along a central hallway. Most were open, showing desks covered in dust and old paperwork. One door at the end was closed, padlocked from the outside. Gary moved to it, put his ear against the wood. Heard nothing. He knocked softly. 3 taps. Silence. Then a voice. Female, young, frightened. Who's there? My name's Gary. I'm a friend of Vic's. I'm getting you out. Vic, the voice broke. Is he okay? They said they'd hurt him if I didn't cooperate. He's safe. Stay quiet. Gary examined the padlock. Good quality. Not something he could pick with a knife. He'd need to break the hasp. That would make noise. He looked around. Found a length of pipe in one of the offices. 3 feet long, iron, heavy. He wedged the pipe through the padlock's shackle and levered. The metal groaned. He pulled harder. The hasp screws pulled free from the doorframe with a sharp crack. Voices shouted from below. What was that? Check upstairs. Footsteps on the metal stairs. Fast. Gary shoved the door open. Inside was a small room. Mattress on the floor. Bucket in the corner. A girl sat on the mattress, maybe 21. Dark hair, tangled face gaunt. Katie. Come on, Gary said. Now. She scrambled up. Gary took her hand and pulled her into the hallway. The stairs were blocked. One of the men was halfway up, gun drawn. Stop right there, the man shouted. Gary didn't stop. He ran the opposite direction, pulling Katie with him. The hallway ended at a window, boarded from the inside. Gary slammed his shoulder into the boards. Old wood, rotted. They splintered. Gunshots. 2, 3. Bullets punched through the wall beside Gary's head. Drywall dust exploded. Gary kicked the remaining boards free. Looked out. 15-foot drop to an alley. Not ideal, but not impossible. Can you climb? He asked Katie. I think so. Don't think, do. He helped her through the window. She hung from the sill, dropped. Landed hard but stayed on her feet. Gary followed. The impact sent pain shooting up from his bad leg, but he ignored it. They ran. Behind them, more gunshots. A bullet sparked off the pavement, 3 feet to Gary's right. They reached the street. Gary's borrowed SUV was 2 blocks away. Too far. He pulled Katie into the recessed doorway of a closed pawn shop. Stay down, he said. She nodded, breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. Gary looked back. 2 men emerged from the alley, both armed, both looking around. One pointed toward the pawn shop. Gary cursed under his breath. No weapon, no cover. Bad odds. Then sirens. Multiple vehicles. Coming fast. 3 FBI Suburbans screamed around the corner, tires smoking. They boxed in the warehouse. Agents poured out tactical gear, rifles up. Diane Fletcher stepped from the lead vehicle, megaphone in hand. Federal agents, drop your weapons, hands in the air. The 2 men from the warehouse froze, looked at each other. One dropped his gun immediately. The other hesitated, then followed suit. Both were on the ground in cuffs within 30 seconds. Fletcher spotted Gary in the doorway. She walked over, face expressionless. I told you to stay at the diner, she said. I don't take orders well. Clearly, she looked at Katie. You're Victor Howell's sister. Katie nodded, unable to speak. Fletcher's expression softened fractionally. You're safe now. Paramedics are on the way. She looked back at Gary. You're lucky you didn't get killed, or get her killed. But I didn't. No, you didn't. She paused. We've been building a case against Dalton for 18 months. Your live stream and the phone records accelerated everything. We were already moving when you called. The warehouse raid was happening today regardless. You just complicated it. Is Dalton inside? No, he wasn't here, but we'll find him. Fletcher's radio crackled. She listened, then nodded. They found the bums, 11 females, all pregnant or recently birthed, all malnourished and showing signs of abuse. We're transporting them to a facility in Aurora. They'll be cared for. And Vanessa Pritchard. Team's moving on her location now. She won't run. She has nowhere to go. More sirens, this time police, city cruisers. They pulled up behind the FBI vehicles. Officers emerged. Fletcher spoke to them briefly, pointing at the warehouse at the suspects in cuffs. Gary stepped back, letting the professionals work. Katie sat on the curb, wrapped in a blanket. An EMT had provided sipping water from a bottle. She looked shell-shocked. Couldn't process that it was over. Gary understood. Sometimes the worst part wasn't the trauma. It was the moment after, when your mind tried to convince you it wasn't real, that you'd wake up and still be trapped. Fletcher returned. You need to come with me. Statement, debrief. Probably 6 hours of paperwork. Can it wait? I have a pregnant dog that needs attention. The dog that started all of this. Yeah, her. Fletcher considered. Where is she? The Griddle. Diner off I-25. I know it. I'll have an agent drive you. But Gary, she fixed him with that surgical stare. This isn't over. Dalton's still out there. And now he knows you're involved. He knows your face, your name. He'll come for you. Let him. That's not bravado talking, is it? No, ma'am, it's experience. Fletcher almost smiled. Almost. Be careful, Mr. Brennan. We need you alive to testify. An agent drove Gary back to the diner. Katie came along, refusing to be separated from the man who'd pulled her out of that room. They arrived just before noon. Vic was standing outside, pacing, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. When he saw Katie get out of the FBI vehicle, the cigarette fell from his fingers. He ran to her. They collided in an embrace that looked like it might break bones. Both were crying. Gary looked away. Some moments were private. Cody trotted over, tail wagging slightly. The shepherd had been on high alert for 2 days straight. Even he needed a moment of relief. Gary scratched behind Cody's ears. Good boy, Gary said quietly. You did good. He checked on Willow. She was awake, looking more alert than before. Her eyes followed Gary as he approached. When he reached into the SUV, she didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Let him run his hand along her head. Almost over, Gary told her. Almost. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Mr. Brennan. The voice was male, older, calm, too calm. My name is Vincent Dalton. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Gary's pulse stayed steady. Training overrode instinct. I don't have anything of yours. The dog, Asset 47, she's mine. I paid for her, invested considerable resources in her development. I'd like her returned. Not going to happen. I'm not asking, I'm informing you. You've caused significant disruption to my business. The FBI is currently raiding my properties, seizing my assets, arresting my associates. This is unacceptable. Good, Dalton chuckled. It was a sound like ice cracking. You misunderstand the situation. I've been doing this for 20 years. I have lawyers. I have judges. I have political connections you can't imagine. In 6 months, I'll be free. The charges will be reduced or dismissed. The evidence will be inadmissible. And when that happens, I'll remember you. I'll remember that dog. And I'll make sure you understand the consequences of interference. You threatening me? I'm educating you. There's a difference. Here's your education, Gary said. I'm a former Navy SEAL. I've been shot at by people a lot scarier than you. I've watched friends die. I've killed men who needed killing. You think you're dangerous because you hurt animals and bribe cops? You're not dangerous. You're a coward who hides behind money and intimidation. And cowards always fall when someone pushes back. Silence on the line. Then, you just made a very serious mistake, Mr. Brennan. Get in line. Gary hung up. His hand was steady. His pulse was steady. Training overrode instinct. You could learn to manage fear. The agent who'd driven him approached. Everything okay? No, but it will be. That afternoon, Fletcher called again. We found Dalton trying to cross into New Mexico. He's in custody. Also arrested Vanessa Pritchard at her facility. Found 3 more dogs buried on the property. We're excavating. The 11 from the warehouse. Being treated, veterinary team from Colorado State is handling it. They're in bad shape, but most will survive. And the charges. Federal, animal trafficking, racketeering, corruption, money laundering. We're looking at RICO statutes. This goes deep. 14 officers arrested so far. 2 judges under investigation. Bank records show $4.7 million moved through shell companies over 3 years. Gary felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief exactly, more like vindication, like maybe this one time doing the right thing had actually mattered. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me. Thank yourself. And that live stream. It gave us the public pressure we needed to move fast. 1,800,000 people watched it. The story's national now. Dalton can't make this disappear. After the call ended, Gary sat in the SUV with Willow. Cody lay in the back, the three of them quiet in the afternoon sun. We need to get you to a real vet, Gary said to Willow. Someone who can monitor the pregnancy. Make sure you are okay. Willow's tail thumped once against the blanket. Just once. But it was the first time Gary had seen her respond to anything with something other than fear. Dr. Walsh's clinic was 2 hours away. Gary called ahead. Iguaman. She was waiting when they arrived. I saw the news, she said as she helped Gary carry Willow inside. You've been busy? Wasn't planned. The best things never are. She examined Willow thoroughly. Blood work, ultrasound, full physical. Gary sat in the corner of the exam room watching while Cody maintained his post by the door. After an hour, Dr. Walsh pulled off her gloves. She's stable. The puppies are healthy, 9 total. She'll likely go into labor within the week. Maybe sooner if she's stressed. But given everything she's been through, she's remarkably strong. Can she stay here? For a few days. After that, she'll need somewhere quiet, safe, low stress. Gary thought about his cabin, the burned-out shell of it. The fire department had called that morning. Accidental blaze, they'd said. Gary knew better. Dalton's people sending a message. I'll figure something out, Gary said. Walsh studied him. You can't keep running. I'm not running, I'm regrouping. What's the difference? Direction. That night, Gary slept in the cab of the borrowed SUV in the clinic's parking lot. Cody slept in the back. Every hour, Gary woke and checked the perimeter. Training never left. At 3 in the morning, his phone buzzed. Fletcher. Dalton's being transferred to federal detention in Denver. He'll be arraigned tomorrow. Press is going to be there. This is going to be big. I don't care about press. You should. Public attention keeps him from disappearing. Make sure this sticks. Gary was quiet for a moment. Then, the dogs, the 11 from the warehouse. What happens to them? They're evidence. They'll be held until trial. After that, if they're healthy enough, they'll be put up for adoption through legitimate rescues. And if they're not healthy enough, Fletcher didn't answer immediately, we'll do everything we can. It wasn't a promise. It was a hope. Gary had learned the difference. The week passed in a blur. Statements, depositions, media requests that Gary refused. The story grew. The live stream had been viewed 3.2 million times. News outlets picked it up. Animal rights groups mobilized. Congress members issued statements. Vincent Dalton was denied bail. Federal prosecutor was pursuing maximum sentences. 14 officers were suspended pending investigation. 2 judges resigned. And through it all, Gary stayed with Willow. On the 7th day at 2 in the morning, she went into labor. Dr. Walsh called Gary immediately. He arrived within 20 minutes, Cody in tow. They set up in the surgical suite, lights, bright instruments ready. Willow was panting, restless, trying to find a comfortable position. Her eyes found Gary's, held them. And in that moment, he understood something profound. She trusted him. Despite everything humans had done to her, she still trusted one. Gary knelt beside the whelping box Dr. Walsh had prepared. Put his hand where Willow could see it. She pressed her nose against his palm. You've got this, Gary said quietly. I'm right here. The first puppy came at 2:47 a.m. A female, black and tan. She emerged in the sack, not moving. Dr. Walsh worked quickly, clearing the membrane, rubbing the tiny body with a towel. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then a squeak. Small, indignant, alive. Willow immediately turned and began licking her puppy, the instinct overriding exhaustion. The second puppy arrived 12 minutes later. Male, stronger. He was crying before Dr. Walsh even finished clearing him. Third puppy, female, smaller than the others. She came out silent, no movement. Dr. Walsh's expression tightened. She rubbed harder, trying to stimulate breath. Cleared the airway. Nothing. Come on, Dr. Walsh muttered. Come on, little one. Still nothing. The puppy's body was limp, cooling. Gary moved without thinking. He took the tiny form from Dr. Walsh's hands, cupped it in his palms. It weighed maybe 6 ounces. He could feel the faint flutter of a heartbeat. Barely there. Fading. Cody moved closer, pressing his nose against Gary's hands. The big shepherd's warm breath washed over the puppy. And then something impossible happened. The puppy twitched, just slightly, drew in a tiny shuddering breath, and cried. The sound was barely audible, but it was there. Dr. Walsh's eyes widened. I'll be damned. Gary placed the puppy against Willow's belly. The mother immediately pulled it close, licking, warming, accepting. The remaining 6 puppies came over the next hour, all healthy, all strong. By 4:30 a.m., Willow lay exhausted in the whelping box, 9 puppies nursing at her belly. 8 were vigorous and active. One, the smallest, the one who'd almost died, was quieter, but alive. Dr. Walsh cleaned up, checking vitals one more time. Remarkable, she said. All 9 survived. That's rare even in ideal circumstances. Gary was sitting on the floor back against the wall watching. Cody lay beside him, head on Gary's lap. The shepherd was finally relaxing the tension of the past week, bleeding away. The little one, Gary said. The one that almost didn't make it. Does it have a chance? Hard to say. The first 48 hours are critical. But if it makes it through that, I'd say yes, a good chance. Gary looked at the tiny puppy, barely distinguishable from its siblings except for size, fighting to live against odds that should have killed it. Victor, Gary said. Its name is Victor. Dr. Walsh smiled. After Vic Howell, after the man who chose to do the right thing even when it cost him everything. The sun rose over the mountains, turning the clinic's windows gold. Gary finally allowed himself to close his eyes, just for a moment, just to rest. When he woke, it was afternoon. Someone had covered him with a blanket. Cody was still beside him. And in the whelping box, Willow slept peacefully, all 9 puppies nestled against her. Gary's phone showed 14 missed calls. He ignored them. Let the world wait. This moment mattered more. Dr. Walsh entered with coffee. You look like hell. Feel worse. There's someone here to see you. Gary stood, joints creaking, followed her to the lobby. Katie and Vic were waiting. Katie looked healthier, some color back in her face. Vic looked older, but lighter somehow, like a burden had been lifted. We saw the news, Katie said. About the puppies. Are they okay? All 9 survived. Vic exhaled slowly. That's good. That's really good. He paused. The FBI offered me a deal, immunity in exchange for testimony. I'm taking it. Smart. I wanted to thank you, for Katie, for giving me a chance to make things right. You made things right yourself. I just provided the opportunity. Katie stepped forward and hugged Gary. Unexpected. Tight. You saved my life. You saved your own life by surviving, Gary said. I just opened a door. They left after a few more words. Gary returned to the surgical suite. Willow was awake watching her puppies. When Gary entered, her tail wagged. Actually wagged. Hey girl, Gary said softly. You did it. You're a mom. He sat beside the box. Cody joined him. Together they watched the puppies squirm and nurse and sleep. Gary's phone rang. Fletcher. It's done, she said. Dalton's been charged under RICO. Federal prosecutor is confident. We seized enough evidence to put him away for 20 years minimum. The 14 officers are facing charges. The operation's dismantled. Completely. And the other dogs? 47 tracked in total, 31 confirmed dead, 11 rescued from the warehouse, 5 still unaccounted for, but we're working with Canadian authorities. We think they were sold before reaching Colorado. We're trying to track them. What happens now? Now we build the case. Trials will take months, years maybe, but we'll get convictions. I'm sure of it. She paused. There's something else. Vanessa Pritchard. She called our tip line, wants to cooperate, says Dalton was holding her daughter hostage, forcing her to run the operation. Gary thought about the woman with the broom handle, the cold eyes, the calculated cruelty. You believe her. The daughter's real. Emma Pritchard, 19. We found her in one of Dalton's properties. She'd been held 3 weeks. So yes, there's truth there. But Vanessa was complicit for years before that. She'll still face charges, but cooperation might reduce her sentence. What about Emma? She's safe, reunited with her mother under supervision. They're both in protective custody until trial. After she hung up, Gary looked at Willow, at the 9 lives she'd brought into the world despite everything designed to break her. You're not inventory, he said to her. You're not a number. You're Willow. And these are your puppies. No one's taking that away from you. Willow's eyes met his. Understanding or coincidence, Gary couldn't say, but he chose to believe understanding. That evening, as Gary sat watching the puppies, his phone rang again. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him. Mr. Brennan, this is Assistant District Attorney Carver. I'm calling about the Dalton case. What about it? We have a problem. The phone you recovered, Vanessa Pritchard's phone, was obtained without a warrant. Defense is moving to suppress. If the judge agrees, we lose our primary evidence. Gary's jaw tightened. What about the live stream, the medical records? Circumstantial, not enough for RICO charges. Dalton walks. That's not acceptable. It's the law, Mr. Brennan, unless you have something else. Something that doesn't violate the Fourth Amendment. Gary thought about the 11 dogs at the warehouse, the GPS logs, Vic's testimony, Vanessa's cooperation. What if Vanessa Flips testifies against Dalton? She'd need a reason. Right now she's facing 20 years. No incentive to cooperate beyond what she's already offered. What if I talk to her? Officially, I can't authorize that. Unofficially, if a concerned citizen wanted to visit a witness in protective custody, I couldn't stop them. Carver gave him an address, a safe house in Aurora. Gary hung up and looked at Dr. Walsh. I need to go somewhere. Can Willow stay here tonight? Of course, but Gary, what are you planning? Closing a loophole. The safe house was a modest ranch in a quiet neighborhood. 2 FBI agents stood outside. Gary showed his ID, explained who he was. They made calls. After 10 minutes, they let him in. Vanessa Pritchard sat at a kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. Her daughter Emma sat beside her, blonde and young and fragile. When Vanessa saw Gary, her face went pale. I'll keep this short, Gary said. The phone evidence might be thrown out. If it is Dalton Walks, you both know what that means. Vanessa's hands trembled. He'll kill us. Yes, unless you give them something else. Something ironclad, testimony, documents, bank records. Whatever you have, that ties Dalton directly to the operation. I gave them everything. Not everything. You held something back. Insurance, people like you always do. Vanessa was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and walked to a bedroom, returned with a shoebox. Inside were ledgers, handwritten, dates, amounts, DUC registrations, buyer names. 20 years of records, Vanessa said. Dalton kept copies. I kept copies of his copies, in case he ever tried to eliminate me. Gary looked at the ledgers. They were damning, complete, undeniable. Give these to the FBI, Gary said. Testify, and maybe, just maybe, you and your daughter have a future. Vanessa nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'm sorry for all of it, for the ducks, for Willow. I was weak. Weak is one thing, Gary said. Evil is another. Don't confuse them. You have a chance to choose which one you were. He left without another word. 6 months later, Gary stood on the porch of a new cabin. Not rented. Owned. Small. Simple. But his. The insurance payout from the burned cabin had helped. Donations from people who'd watched the live stream had helped more. Strangers sending money to a veteran who'd saved a dog. The world could still surprise you. Willow lay in the yard, healthy now, coat shining. 8 puppies, now 6 months old, tumbled around her. They'd all found homes, every single one. Families who'd been vetted carefully. Veterans mostly, people who understood trauma, who knew that healing wasn't linear. Except Victor, the smallest puppy, the one who'd almost died. He stayed. Gary couldn't let him go. Vic Howell had laughed when he heard the puppy's name, said it was an honor he didn't deserve. Gary disagreed. Victor played with Cody, now the older shepherd, tolerating the puppy's energy with patient dignity. Cody had become a father figure without trying, teaching Victor how to be a dog again, how to trust, how to play. Gary's phone rang. Fletcher. They talked every few weeks now. Updates on the case. Dalton was convicted, she said. 22 years federal prison. No parole. Vanessa Pritchard got 12 with cooperation credit. The 14 officers' sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The judges are facing disbarment and criminal charges. It's over, Gary, really over. What about the dogs, the 5 that were unaccounted for, sir? We found 3, alive, in Mexico, working with authorities there to repatriate them. 2 are still missing. We're not giving up. Good. There's something else. The case generated national attention. Congress is drafting new legislation, harsher penalties for animal trafficking, better enforcement mechanisms. They're calling it Willow's Law. Gary looked at the shepherd sleeping in the sun. She'd probably prefer a steak. Fletcher laughed. Actually laughed. Probably, but the law matters. This case proved these operations exist, proved they can be stopped. You did that. We did that. Fair enough. After she hung up, Gary sat on the porch steps. Cody came and sat beside him. Victor climbed into Gary's lap, tiny still, but growing. Willow watched from the yard, content. The mountains rose in the distance, purple and eternal. The sky was the kind of blue that hurt to look at. Clean, infinite. Gary thought about the day he'd found Willow, about the chain and the wire muzzle and the woman with the broom handle, about the choice he'd made to interfere, to get involved, to risk everything for a life that wasn't his to save. He'd spent 2 years after leaving the service trying to figure out what came next, what a man did when the mission ended and the purpose disappeared. He thought maybe there was no answer, that some people were built for war and broken by peace. But sitting here with 3 dogs and a second chance, he understood something he hadn't before. The mission never ended. It just changed shape, protecting the innocent, standing between the weak and the predators. That didn't require a uniform, didn't require orders from command. It just required the willingness to act when action was needed. Willow stood and walked over. She laid her head on Gary's knee. He scratched behind her ears. "We did good, didn't we, girl?" he said quietly. Her tail wagged. Once, twice. Agreement or coincidence? Gary chose agreement. The sun moved lower. The shadows grew long. And in a cabin in the Colorado mountains, a man who'd lost his way found something worth protecting, something worth fighting for. Not a country, not a cause, just life. Simple, stubborn, refusing to give up. And sometimes that was enough. Sometimes that was everything. The screen fades slowly to black. White text appears against the darkness.